Draft Season Podcast. We are back in the building with another installment of our 2022-2023 NBA Team Preview Series, and we are talking about the Milwaukee Bucks on today's video. If you guys are just checking out this video, please make sure you guys subscribe to the Draft Season Podcast. Be on the lookout for all of our new drops. We do have a very, very special guest, a friend of the show, host of the Hoop Truther podcast with our another one of our good friends of the pod, Nick Andre. Shout out to Nick, definitely out there in Florida right now, dealing with the after effects of the hurricane. But you know what I'm saying, hope everybody down there is doing good and up to speed sooner than later. But joining us on today is Gu, my guy Gu, man. Yo, appreciate you for hopping on here. You can follow him on Twitter. You do see the tag right there, _Gucifer. Gu, my guy, obviously, you know what I'm saying, you sent the the Batmobile, the Bat Alert, whatever that shit's called, for us to come on your pod last season. So definitely was looking forward to get you on here, man. I've spoke about this on the previous episode, just about it's always great to hear from actual fans, of a team, people who, because I've noticed this a while just in my, the ridiculous amounts of NBA basketball and just basketball in general that I am watching. When it comes to, if you really want, the most in-depth analysis and the people who really follow the team, you can go to the beat reporters, obviously.
Right.
But when you do, if you're looking at a lot of the national guys, they aren't, tapping in with the day-to-day of these teams, like the best fanalists and just, fans of actually that follow these teams. So first of all, we have a Bucks fan on here. So I'm going to ask, how the hell do you end up a Bucks fan, first and foremost? So let's start there, actually.
Sure. So no bandwagon, I promise. I got stuff behind the camera now with stuff from back in the day. I grew up in Milwaukee from 97 up until 2020. I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So it's actually funny. I'll keep it quick, but the only reason I started watching sports, my dad, who is a professor, had a TV free week once a month in our household. And the only exception was educational programs and sports. So I figured I may as well get into sports to be able to avoid the TV free week. And I watched the dog shit Milwaukee Bucks 2011, 12, 2010, 11. Brandon Jennings rookie year, which is great. Andrew Bogut before he's breaking everything. Ersan Ilyasova for one of the 4 times that he was a Milwaukee Buck. And short after that, a couple years later, they draft Giannis and Chris. But honestly, I was there for BJ from the start. Under Armour shoe, cool player, LA Compton kid, one of the coolest athletes we had in Milwaukee at the time. So that's how I started off, and I've been with them ever since, man.
That's the Bucks and 6.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Bucks is there.
So when you probably had some butterflies inside of you when you saw Brandon Jennings holding the championship after the Bucks won it a couple years ago.
Yeah, it was so nice. He was on the court side the whole time, just cheering on. A lot of guys didn't want to be in Milwaukee at the time, and when they got out, were happy to get out of Milwaukee. Brandon always had nice things to say about the city, about the team, even when he definitely didn't have to. And it was really nice to see him there, along with some other Bucks legends hosting it up. Big shouts to BJ. Hope he's, I just see him on Twitter these days. I don't know what he's up to.
Yeah, he's talking crazy on Twitter too. I also wanted to say, man, shout out to Papa Goo. That's some great parenting right there. I have to steal that in the future. TV, you have no choice. You're either not watching TV or you're gonna be watching some sports with me. That's A+ parenting. So I gotta say, shout out to that. That was incredible. But yeah, Raz, let's get a little bit into these Bucks before we just start seeing them. So a quick recap of their offseason real quick.
Yeah, so they brought in we'll see what Joe Ingles has left, but he's been brought into the fold here. Pat Connaughton with the contract extension. Bobby Portis, he just seems to love it out there in Milwaukee, so he's coming back. Wes Matthews will be back.
Bobby, don't compare me to Draymond Green, Portis. Thank you very much.
That's true.
They brought back most of their players from last year, and then Sean, one of your draft darlings, the Big Zoe with an interesting story. I mean, Marjon, how do you pronounce that?
Yeah, Beauchamp.
Beauchamp.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't want to butcher the name. Luka Vildoza, Nick Great, is out there. Lindell Wigington and AJ Green. They didn't really lose much, so this is a team is thriving off of just continuity. Brought a few pieces in to kind of bolster some depth, so they are running it back. They had 51 wins last year, with some injuries down the stretch. So this team can win with star power with just Giannis for a bit, especially during the regular season. So, fellas, what do you guys think about a team that's basically running back, saying that they trust their roster healthy versus anybody in the East?
Well, I mean, to bring it to you real quick, Goo, just to set it up for you a little bit, because obviously, like, to move back a little before we move forward with this team, and to talk about just the playoff series. So, what did you kind of see? Do you like the Middleton injury? Obviously, played a huge part of that series for them in the postseason. So, like, what were your main takeaways from that series in general? And like, are you just chalking it up to they didn't need, like, for a team that's kind of always been devoid of just the most explosive firepower, aside from Giannis, who is fireworks in his own Giannis-esque way. But if we're talking about off the dribble shooting and just perimeter dynamism, aside from a guy like Chris, like what did you make of this team? And like Raz said, just the staying put from year to year.
So the Bucks take the Celtics to 7 without Chris Middleton. Robert Williams III is injured on the other end, even though they're playing better without him in that series. If you remember, he's healthy for Game 7 and they DMP him. But great teams persevere. I mean, fuck Chris Middleton. The Bucks didn't have Giannis in the Eastern Conference Finals the year before that. And Atlanta was having injuries with Trae Young too, but great teams figure it out. If you can't, sometimes the injuries do that. It's my opinion that if you take the team of 7, Chris Middleton probably changes that. And if you know Chris Middleton's reputation, not just in the playoffs, but against the Celtics in the playoffs, that was a really big loss for the Bucks. But no, it's not even just the players. It would be great if we had another player that can initiate pick and roll, hit a jumper off the bounce, bring in a Tyrese Maxey out of nowhere like the 76ers did late in the draft. But the offensive scheme, Maxey going to have a year. We can talk about that. But the scheme offensively is just bland, one-dimensional. Giannis posting some action out there. You can run some side action. Drew Holiday is a good pick-and-roll player. I wouldn't say he's a great pick-and-roll player. So when Middleton is out, you need somebody else. I'm of the opinion that if you have Giannis, you should have a roster or a scheme that can win every playoff game and series that you have every year. And last year might not be a failure because of Chris Middleton's injury, but I think it was a disappointment for sure. That's what I saw in that loss last year. And that's probably a bit harsher than the national media is giving it. A lot of people like to focus on the injuries, but I think that the offensive schematics need to change whether Chris Middleton is injured or not. And just like the bubble loss, the loss last year is going to make the team a lot better.
I feel like talking about Bud there is super interesting. Just about, it's, and to talk, because I feel like with the Bucks in general, obviously for a team that's bringing back about 95% of their roster, maybe even higher than 95% of their roster, we know a lot about this team. When we speak about kind of like the question marks and the wild cards among the Eastern Conference, among the league in general, the Bucks really aren't one of them. We can kind of just pencil them in when it's May and it's playoff time. Then it's then the clock really starts ticking for them. But I'm more so interested in just your perspective on, we talk about, when we speak about Giannis in general, and I would kind of say we can kind of also throw Chris Middleton into that kind of bucket of just the general, perception of these guys, obviously there's the Gilbert Arenas thing, which was complete idiocy. And like, I heard to take the first time, I'm just like, Gilbert, like I was super excited about Gilbert Arenas, media darling, media entity, like in the beginning, but like I'm so like over Gilbert Arenas and like the hot takes that he spews, and like he's a great offensive mind, and it played a part of how he got there, obviously. But yeah, some of his takes are really, just like freezing cold, and a lot of them aren't going to age well. But there's still a lot of people who would, repeat a lot of the same talking points that he brought up about Giannis. Just kind of being a brute force type of player, being somebody who hasn't added to his game, which 100% false.
Right.
That's not true at all. And also Middleton as well as just somebody who kind of people see him as like a fake all-star or a fake all-NBA player or kind of, still somebody who is probably still more. And I think we talk about NBA media, I think they understand a lot more so than fans of, the impact that Chris Middleton does have and how important his shooting is for this team. But if we talk about just Giannis and Middleton coming into this year and just their perceptions, as somebody who follows the Bucks closely and is a Buck fan, what do you make of that? What's your I know you read things on the timeline and you're just like fucking dumb shit.
I mean, I thought I was done seeing AD is better than Giannis takes 2 years ago, let alone this summer when
You've seen that recently?
Out. Yeah,
we were just talking about that on the last episode, bro. I promise you. We were doing the Lakers episode, and we were talking about the Giannis versus AD thing.
I think it's the same thing that they said about LeBron and Shaq. Not that, Giannis is going to be a whatever top player of all time when he retires. But so I'm not putting him on the same pedestal as LeBron and Shaq. But LeBron especially, it's just the stacking up of the hate. At first, it was he couldn't win, and he's, mentally not a good teammate. And then he did win, and then everyone says that if he didn't have his athleticism and his height, he wouldn't be able to do the things he does, which is fucking true. There's nothing. They say the same thing about Giannis. It's true. Giannis had a quote the other day that he said, the NBA isn't about skills. What he meant was, if you are tall and you are athletic, you do have a really good chance if you don't refine those skills. It's a very good point. Guys like Derrick Jones Jr. were in the league way before they really knew how to play basketball, because Derrick Jones Jr. had the body and he had the hops that he could be in basketball. Derrick Jones Jr. is like a legit third string, second string wing at this point, but he wasn't that 4 years ago when he was on the Heat. Giannis comes in the league very raw, just long, rail thin, puts on the strength, and he has figured out lots of the game. I'm not sure if it's xenophobia. Some people, a lot of the American players in the league seem to be friends with each other and they train with each other. I wouldn't say it's necessarily just that, but I think it's someone that maybe didn't grow up in the same type of circumstances and is just dominating everyone. And for that guy to have no interest in becoming a part of the NBA brotherhood, he doesn't go to the parties and he doesn't go to the big events to hang out with them. People feel a certain type of way about that. But in terms of like old players and people with that perception, I'll tell you this. As a Bucks fan, forever, a decade plus, I've been watching them. Please keep hating on the Bucks and Giannis, because as soon as we become favored to win stuff is when they choke the most. When they are up, or when they are the number one seed or the best team in the league and Giannis is the best player, that's when the Bucks seem to forget what they're doing for whatever reason. When they're losing, when they're a man down in the playoffs or things like that, that's when they kick it into gear. So I don't care what the people are saying about them, but I hope they keep doing it. I hope they keep underrating them, because that's the only way we're going to get it. Sorry if that was a long answer.
No. I loved it. It was a great answer, obviously, and it's multifaceted and multi-layered, especially with the Giannis thing. And just going back to like the main point about it, and it's like you said about the athleticism point. And yeah, I know, like there's definitely more athletes in the NBA than basketball players, and it might be something that goes over certain people's heads, and it is true. But the athleticism does matter, and it's super important. Just because, we're talking about, like 1% athletes in the world, and some of the most, people who do miraculous things on a basketball court, and the ones who really do, stand out the most are really the guys who are the athletic outliers. So you can say it doesn't matter all you want, but for that type of skill set, you still do need to understand the game, and it has to click for you at a certain point to where you just can't be all athleticism and reach the level of success that Giannis has had. And just watching his jump shot, the jump shot has come. Like, it's not I think even with Giannis, are the percentages ever going to be pretty for Giannis? Probably not. And but Raz, we spoke about this, and I think about it when I watch him a lot. in Scotty Barnes. And Raz, I'll never forget you said this when we did the breakdown about Scotty Barnes, and you were just like, yeah, Scotty can't really shoot. And if you're just looking at the numbers, it's not effective, but he's not afraid to shoot. And, just that willingness, and you combine that with the work ethic that, the greatest people and greatest players in the league possess. And that's when we start talking about, you talk about where Giannis is going to end up when his career is over, and like he's probably going to finish as a top 15 player as his floor, and it's probably going to be a lot higher than that. So I mean, for you, Raz, just talking about this team in general, the Joe Ingles aspect is I find it interesting. Really good. It's a really good situation for Joe Ingles. I thought last year when he was in Utah, you kind of did see signs of the age coming, starting to bite him. If he's able to shoot like he was in his prime, we're talking about what do you kind of see his role is in the rotation. Obviously, Joe Ingles is a really really great passer, and his ability. He's able to really kill defenses with a lot of nifty passes and tight corners. And things of that nature. It's something that the Bucks kind of have missed if we're just talking about the addition of other really good passers. I do think Middleton has improved, and like you did say, Drew Holiday is probably a good, not great pick and roll player. And with Giannis, especially with the havoc and the lanes that he does create for the people who are playing off of what he does on the court, it's gonna if you have somebody who can play that connector piece and is able to really read the floor in a swift manner, even if bringing that old man game along with him, it should still be pretty damn effective. As Joe Ingles was kind of he was a starter on a team that perennially won 50 plus games the last couple seasons. So and they gave him a lot. I think he got the full mid level for
1 year 6.
So what do you kind of foresee for the Ingles things? I kind of I watch him as passing things, and I think the passing might be it might unlock some stuff that we kind of might be just shoo-shooing and sweeping under the rug with what some of his passing might unlock in some funky lineups.
I mean, if he's real, if I'm not worried about the offense, to be fully honest. I mean, Ingles has always been an old man player, and he's never relied on his athleticism. That stuff doesn't really go away. Chris Middleton destroyed his hamstring like 3-4 years ago, took away a lot of his athleticism, but it didn't really affect the offense. The offense has been, if anything, he's gotten just more precise with his offense. It's the defense where you see signs of slippage. That's where I'm worried with Ingles. Can he stay on the floor in a playoff matchup? Does he get picked on by Tatum and Brown over and over again in a series? On offense, this isn't really an exaggeration. Outside of Giannis, he's probably the best passer on the roster. That's not mentioning Luca Vildoza, the Argentine kid who's on probably not going to make the active roster after training camp, but Ingles is just a great passer. And he doesn't have the pull-up game that Chris Middleton has, but I think they brought him in essentially to be Diet Coke Chris Middleton. He can hit the three. He's 6'7", 6'8", can run the pick and roll, and he'll find a pass for Giannis. I actually think it's a pretty good addition, and I had a negative reaction on free agency. It happened within 10 minutes, 20 minutes of free agency. After you saw market price, there's only one player that got the full mid-level that I would have preferred over Joe Ingles. That's Bruce Brown over in Denver. Denver had a great fucking offseason, and I love Bruce Brown. Bruce doesn't fix the offensive issues that the Bucks have, but I think he's just a better upgrade on defense. So Ingles is the way they go. We expect him in December and January. I think he'll be the backup point guard. If not like a big guard off the bench. Like he'll play the three and he'll guard threes, but he'll run the pick and roll on offense. I would assume so at least. Another thing that it adds, two other things. One, he's not afraid to get in people's faces, and some of the guys on this Bucks team are timid. We miss it after PJ was left. The guys will get in your face. And two, someone that can heat up in those crunch time moments, not afraid of taking shots. Grayson Allen is a perfect example of the opposite of that. Guy just couldn't hoist the shots when he needed to last year against Boston. I think Ingles is going to do that. Personally, I think if Ingles remains the number one pickup that they got in the offseason, I still think they're going to make a trade. I would be worried about their ceiling, but he is an addition to that playoff roster.
I mean, the Bucks
like as you're very tapped in, and you went on the beautiful soliloquy about the continuity and the heart of this team. They're resilient. They've been there before, and they usually rise to the occasion. I think just to shine some pessimism on such a beautiful story that you had earlier is it's the East is turned into a very stacked conference. Now, like you said, if Joe Ingles is the piece, right, and he gets back to Joe Ingles being Joe Ingles, he's a proven kind of commodity. He also kind of shows up in some big games, the limited big games he's had out in Utah. What trades do you see that would get you to feel comfortable in where this team ceiling needs to be to finish at the top of with the championship?
Right. So I would love Jay Crowder. The Phoenix Suns aren't going to trade with us, and that's fine. I don't need they're not going to trade with the guys that they lost to in the finals. They're probably not going to send Jay Crowder to the Lakers. It's how the Phoenix Suns operate. He's a guy that I would target. I'm not a Jordan Clarkson guy. I like him as a player. I just don't think he can play past the second round. I don't need him. May as well just keep Grayson if you're gonna, because Grayson would have to be part of the trade to make the salary work for Jordan Clarkson. I'm not going to trade George Hill, and a pick for Jordan Clarkson just so he can't play in the second round either. My number one guy, I said this on the pod on Monday, and it's not sure that he's available, but we've had interest in the past, and this team is probably going to be bad this year, so they might sell off some guys. I think PJ Washington is a perfect fit for Milwaukee. I think he can play a little bit, not a ton, but when PJ was in Milwaukee in the playoffs, they could play PJ, Giannis, and Brooke in the starting lineup. I think you could do a little bit of that with PJ, but what he really is, in the bubble, I don't know if you guys remember, before we lost to the Heat, their buyout market pickup was Marvin Williams, his last stint in the NBA before he retired in Charlotte. And he was the perfect small ball four to play next to Giannis. Played defense, passed the ball, shot the ball well. Bobby Portis is a version of that, but he's not as versatile defensively as Marvin Williams was. PJ Washington is. With Brooke, Chris, and Drew Holiday all past 31, 32 years old, the team needs to identify the guard, wing, and big of the future to match with Giannis to keep this as a dynasty. I like to picture it as a dynasty because of how good Giannis is going to be for a decade. Marjon Beachamp has a chance, I'd say an okay chance, of becoming that wing of the future. PJ Washington is the only guy that I can see on the trade market that could be that big of the future. Outside of that, I've got no targets. Do you guys have anything that you've thrown around that you'd like as a fit?
I mean, I'm still thinking now what is Milwaukee parting with to get some of this stuff done, right? Like you obviously will have I guess you would bank it all on picks, right? Because you have Giannis locked up. You feel that them picks won't be anywhere near the caliber of player you'll need to make a difference, right? So I guess the picks, but who's available? It's
John Collins.
John Collins is available, right? You would think if the Cavs hadn't gone all in on with D Mitch and tried to accelerate their title, then maybe somebody like K Love would have been accessible with the right amount of picks, things like that. But I think your best bet right now, like you said, would have been Jay Crowder, but I don't see the Suns. I don't see the Suns doing that. That's tough, Sean. You got any ideas?
No, and that's kind of the interesting part about just the team in general. But you said, just in terms of building, and that's kind of like just the future of the Bucks and whatever the title window for this team is. I'd probably still say it's open for another 2-3 years. We're not approaching anything near like the what happened in Utah in terms of the window slamming shut. But it's an interesting conversation to be had. But as long as you have Giannis on this team, he's the type of Herculean type of his production and his impact on the games is always going to make them probably a contender, regardless of the load. And one last thing on Joe Ingles, pulling up because he only shot 34% from three last season, but I forgot how good of a shooter he is. And looking back at his previous season, which would have been the 2021 season, 45% from three in total. 85 percentile as a pull-up shooter, 41%. Catch and shoot, he made 49% of his threes, which was 97 percentile. Above the break, 44%. Corner threes, 47%, 84th percentile. If you add that to the Bucks, it's gonna be looked at like an incredible, maybe not acquisition that changes their fortunes in the postseason. But even just raising their floor in the regular season and giving them another competitor in in the postseason would be incredible for them. So, but going back to just the future, I mean, Raz, for you at least, and then Google will get you back in here. Talking about some of the other secondary pieces on this roster, who do you think is going to have like interesting impacts rotation wise, or maybe some of the back end developmental roster guys?
That was for me.
Yeah, I mean that was it could go to anybody, but that was for you.
Okay, I'll say the back end of this roster. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't consider Bobby Portis the back end of this, but no, he's a very important part of it. But the depth that you kind of brought in, like Serge Ibaka's still there. We'll see what he has left to offer. I think he can be a piece in some matchups. You don't obviously want him playing big minutes, but rim protection to spell Brook Lopez, and he has shown the ability to step out and hit the occasional three. So you don't lose too much in terms of like your schematic stuff with Serge in there. And I think it's some of the young guys, right? Like George Hill, we're getting towards corpse period of George Hill. And so it's like, what is Javon Carter going to give you that's better than George Hill? Probably availability and defense right now. And then the Wesley Matthews and the Marjon kind of, the battle there, because Wesley Matthews, he's obviously not the Wesley Matthews of old, but he still provides some type of veteran grit really there and some defense there. Yeah. Like he's definitely
it looked like it was curtains for Wesley before
after the Achilles, right?
No. Achilles was a while ago. The Achilles was a while ago, but even
with the Lakers.
I know he was on his Lakers. Yeah, he was on the Lakers before. He did not look,
and he wasn't signed until December last year. Yeah.
So I mean, he's revitalized here, and he plays a very specific role. Well, Marjon can also offer some athleticism, and I think in a season that's going to be this long, obviously as these NBA seasons are a grind, you'll look to get him some minutes to kind of spell some of these veterans in some of these matchups that are less critical for your big guns.
Yeah, and I think going back to just the point about go ahead.
No, please. Sorry. It just with the end of bench guys, I'll do thoughts on every single one of them. Bobby, 6 Man of the Year campaign starts now. Only thing that's stopping him is the same thing that stopped him last year, was an injury that made him start more than half the games. If that happens for him, great. I'm sure he loves starting. Chris Middleton is out for a couple of weeks, so he might get that starting matchup there. Serge Ibaka, like you said, heavy minutes you probably don't want to have. But if I run into the Sixers or the Cavs in the playoffs, I'm probably happy to have an extra big man on the bench there too. Pat Connaughton, we didn't talk about. I've never seen a player develop like Pat Connaughton, from a complete non-basketball player to a guy that hits 40% of his threes and plays decent, not elite defense on that end. Marjon Beachamp, I got a lot of hype for. I think I have to temper it a little bit. I think this year he's going to go through a lot of growing pains, but the defense is there. I got to see if anything else is, but I'm pretty sure the defense is there. Javon Carter, we love. He's been shooting like 40% from three since he put on a Bucks jersey. I keep waiting for him to miss those threes, and he's just not. The defense looks great. The energy looks great. George Hill is probably a trade chip in terms of just the salary matching $5 million. Jordan Noor is probably just a trade chip with a $2.9 million contract on him. Grayson Allen is going to be the same thing. Grayson Allen probably starts at shooting guard for most of the season. As much as we saw him flail in the playoffs last year, Grayson Hill, at worst, is a very solid rotation player in the regular season, and the Bucks are going to use him like that until they find another option. It's a fine bench. There's no point guard there, like not an actual floor general. Joe Ingles probably props that up when he comes in, but it's better than last year. Like you guys mentioned, a lot of injuries last year. Brook Lopez is hurt, and Giannis is the only guy above like 6'5" on that roster when he goes down beyond Chris Middleton. So he plays center for the whole season, and he does fine, but that probably taxes him at the end of the season there. It's interesting. I think the pieces, if there's guys on the bench that you're paying attention to, it's Bobby, Javon Carter, Joe Ingles, and Pat Connaughton. After that, you'll see Grayson Marjon get minutes, but I'm not sure how much. Sean, I interrupted you there, brother, but let's hear what you got.
No, it's all good. Like, no worries on that. I talk enough on this podcast, but no, I want to talk about Marjon for a second, man.
Please.
Yeah, man, I'm right here with you on the Marjon camp. I think, and like I said, honestly, the Bucks are always going to be too good. I know you mentioned Maxey earlier and how he just absolutely fell into the Sixers' lap at like pick 21. The Bucks probably aren't even going to have a chance to like get somebody like that high in the 20s. So, but we had the conversation earlier about just like the long-term vision of this team and how to keep it's the hardest thing to do. It's the most interesting aspect of non-Draymond punching Jordan Poole in the face aspect of the Warriors the last couple of years and how they're actually doing the two timelines thing.
Very well too.
Yeah, they won it, while having 4 or 5 guys under the age of like 23. So yeah, I think this part of the Bucks and their organization, and they've done a pretty good job. I mean, obviously they found Giannis, which is like the greatest, one of the greatest NBA draft stories that you could find. And even just remembering that draft cycle, like in the grainy Giannis footage, you could barely even find good, footage on Giannis at the time on YouTube. So they definitely get credit for that. But yeah, definitely stockpiling the back end of their roster with interesting two-way guys. And wings that can play around Giannis, because I think they're always going to be able to find centers that can actually be, even though Brook Lopez, for what he brings to this team, is really special. And I forgot who we were talking about having great back end portions of their career as recently on the pod, but Brook Lopez is definitely up there, especially about just how his transformation into floor spacer, and even becoming a much better defender. I think he was always pretty good as a rim protector, but just his ability to move around really improved like after he was 30 and after the Nets got rid of him. But yeah, on Marjon, man, because I think he's one of the more interesting guys in this class, particularly like if you're making a team specific board and what the Bucks do need. He was a really good swing for them. We just talk about how soon he's going to be able to find. It's going to be a completely different role for him playing with Giannis than some of what he did in his high school days. And watching him really closely on the back half of that G League Ignite season, it looked like his ability to play without the ball and even playing off a lot of the ball handling on the G League team. Marjon really wasn't getting, ball reps with guys like Scoot there, Jaden Hardy there, Dyson Daniels there. But it kind of just saw as you and this is kind of just my feel without really looking at the statistics of it. But towards the second half of the season, it did kind of see that he was becoming a lot more comfortable playing without the ball. Early in the G League Ignite season, it kind of felt like he when it comes to playing off ball, knowing the right time, to make that dash and sprint to the basket, it's for some people it's second nature. Depending on, especially for Marjon, who had, if you learn a little bit more about just his his high school days and just the time of basketball that he did miss when he was transferring and didn't play. I think it was maybe his sophomore season or something along those lines. Finding just those additional reps, and it'll be interesting to see. The other thing is the shot is a little streaky for Marjon, but I don't think he has like no touch, and it's a formula for possibly like a year 2 or year 3 impact. I think for Marjon, which where they got him, I don't think. For that portion of the draft, I still think it's a pretty good pick if he can turn into a high end rotation player for them. But as he gets stronger, because I do think for the type of players he's going to be able to guard, he's definitely going to have to add some weight on that. But I mean, also, I know you guys kind of spoke about him on the actual breakdown that you guys did.
You muted.
You muted yourself, Sean. You muted.
If I said, oh no, definitely. This was I was just plugging, man. Make sure you guys are tapped into that Hoop Trooper pod. You guys spoke about him on that, and Sandro Mamu. I'm gonna jack up.
I got you. It's Sandro Mamukelashvili. It actually looks like it's spelled. It's just long, you know.
Yeah, I've definitely butchered that name previously, you know, just on the pod. You know, definitely Seton Hall, by the way, of Montverde. So he's somebody who's kind of been, you know, on, you know, just kind of, you know, the precipice of, or the periphery of just like being a big time prospect. So he's definitely been on radars, but he's a fun player, man. Like he's somebody who's always been interested. He was kind of, that's why I like watching him at Seton Hall and kind of getting to see him also in Eurobasket as well, but kind of getting to see him, you know, take or just expand his game, even if it might not be. But he's also a pretty interesting playmaker for a big who, you know, the floor spacing is kind of hypothetical at this role, but he's comfortable playing in that pick and pop threat. And I think he's somebody who has a pretty interesting game of just, you know, he has nice counters as a post-up guy. And I think his finishing around the basket is also something that has improved over time. So another just interesting guy to watch. I don't know how much he's going to play this year, but you know, just in terms of stocking up the back end of the roster, he's a pretty good, you know, flyer for this team.
Mamu should probably be getting minutes on like a lottery team right now. He's fun. He's on a 2-way contract. It's going to be his 3rd year, I think, on a 2-way contract with the Bucks. The other 2-way they have is AJ Green, not the NFL one. And he's developed. He came out of Seton Hall with touch. That was pretty much it. 6'11" and touch, which is always really interesting to see. And what we've seen more so than the shot, the 3-pointer, I'm not saying it's coming around, but he is becoming more comfortable shooting it, which is always the first step. If it falls, that's cool. If not, what he has really gotten better at is he takes the rebound and he goes coast to coast like few 6'11" guys do, and he'll finish, not just get the foul, but he can finish at the basket pretty well when he does that. He had a great Eurobasket for Georgia, probably one of the only NBA players on that Georgia team, and you could tell when they played. I view him as a Bobby Portis replacement. Not that he'll get traded or he'll leave the Bucks, but at some point, Bobby Portis probably becomes a long-term starter for the Milwaukee Bucks. That's just his trajectory for this team, especially when Brooke retires or gets old enough where he gets put on the bench. And then Mamu becomes that sort of big forward, small ball center that comes off the bench there. But like you said, just another guy that they're figuring out what happens. The last time they had a guy like this, they cut him for Pau Gasol, and he ended up being Christian Wood. Really bad asset management, you know? Whether Sandro's a real player or not, you keep them around and then you can move them for something. It's what the Clippers are doing with Brandon Boston Jr. and Amir Coffey. Aren't real trade chips right now, but like a team is somewhat interested in them. And if you're picking in the 50s and 60s in the second round, like they did with Mamu and Jordan Nora, that's all you can really ask for. Interesting player, but like you said, unless there's knock on wood injuries this year, he's probably not going to see the floor. I mean, he'll see the floor for the G League herd over in Oshkosh, but not in the NBA this year.
Oshkosh, you don't even sound like a real place, man. That sounds like a mental.
I ain't never been. I lived here my whole life.
But yeah, man. I know you mentioned Jordan Nwora. I guess one of the last guys. I don't know. I know Big East guy, Louisville Raz. You know, I know we're familiar with his work. You know, definitely not afraid to let it fly. Probably one of the more unconscious, you know, just scorers on this team. Like if you like, you know, just one-on-one, you know, catching them in like a rec league or something, he would probably look like one of the best guys. Kind of always been the thing with him, just about how he matches up against other, you know, NBA athletes on the wing, and faster, stronger guys. He was able to kind of, you know, use some of his just skill to get by. But there's usually like a big, you know, transition for guys who are like, you know, skill first guys that aren't necessarily plus athletes. And you can usually see whenever he is, you know, tasked with creating, or even if you know, whenever he has to exert a lot of energy on defense, it can be. So I don't know where you guys at on Nwora. He's another one of these guys back in rosters. And he might, you know, I know last year he kind of got into a situation where he had to play a lot of minutes. Is that same avenue for this year, or are you guys like higher on him? Do you see him possibly stealing some more minutes this year?
Raj, let me hear your thoughts on Nwora before I go.
I don't have any. I mean, he like I think that's as honest as I could be. Like it's, I think he's one of those players where you need to see what you have in him, right? But you can't do it at the detriment of the championship window you have right now. So it's kind of one of those things where it's a real fine line to play. Like I think he's going to get garbage time minutes and things like that, but you have to put him in some of the pressure cookers earlier in the season to see how he reacts, to see if the aging bodies of Serge or Brooke start to rear their ugly heads. Can he step in and provide valuable minutes? Yeah,
he's probably more Middleton insurance though than.
On some level, yeah. So
play a few positions.
Yeah, he's big. He's like 6'7", 6'8". Yeah,
he's 6'8". A 6'8" guy that can shoot the way he is has some sort of intrigue in the league. I'll tell you guys this: like he basically does this every year. Preseason and training camp, he hits a bunch of shots. He hits a bunch of he gets guys in isolation, makes them look like fools, but. And it's not even just the defense. Obviously, to play for a Budenholzer coach team, a Milwaukee Bucks contender, you got to exist on the defensive end. But if he was good at everything on offense, he would get a lot more minutes just off of that. Unfortunately, off the ball, he doesn't make the right cuts. He doesn't take the right shots when he gets the ball and it's passed to him. When he drives, he doesn't kick it to the open man. He goes up every time. He'll get a foul, and he's a pretty good finisher, but if there's an open three, he should be kicking it out. He has blinders on when he drives, and it's been 3 years of this. I don't think he's going to become a better basketball player than he is right now. Maybe if he was getting 25 minutes for the Charlotte Hornets, who, man, they make me sad this year. Maybe he gets 25 minutes for a team like that, and maybe he learns more. Unfortunately, the bar to get minutes on this team is too high for him to ride. The team likes him. They believe in him. Budenholzer believes in him. He's probably going to get some minutes with Middleton out for the first couple of weeks of the season, and I can tell you that any Bucks fan that doesn't follow Ball Lone Stop on Twitter is going to be super upset about that. And I don't have any issues with Nora. I mean, if he plays well, he's a good trade chip. Cool. But he's just not him for this roster, for this team. And giving him minutes is taking away minutes likely from Marjon Beachamp, who I really do believe in as a guy that can develop into a playoff rotation player for this roster. Nora seems like a good dude. Mark Budenholzer's his power agent. They'll probably figure out something for him. His restricted free agency was longer than anyone else's, including Colin Sexton's. No one wanted Nora, and the Bucks brought him out for cheap. We'll see what happens, but I don't. If Jordan Nora takes a leap this season, you would not have gotten that prediction from this podcast or any podcast that I've been a guest or a host on. Okay.
And I think, that's kind of like I think you brought up Bud, and it's a perfect place to kind of wrap us up here before we give our official win-loss. So, I mean, Bud's another one, but he's another one of these guys who, kind of saved his job, felt like, with the championship run. He was another one of those guys who had the, just the annual hot seat for him. But you mentioned the, like schematic adjustments or lack of them some years with Bud. As somebody who watches his team, even closer than a lot of even the national guys would claim, where are you at on Bud? Like, what are your nominal opinions on Bud and his tenure, which has been successful, but when we get into championship or bust, the odds are increased there, obviously.
So I guess the way that I feel about Bud right now is that he's not Nick Nurse. He's not Eric Spoelstra, these legit, not just in terms of offense, defense coaches, but schematics, X's and O's, situational basketball, specifically playoff situational basketball. Those guys are elite in all of that, and Budenholzer not. I will say this, though. Maybe you guys will disagree. He might not be Nick Nurse or Spoelstra. He's not Doc either. Like, he's not far and ahead of Doc, but he's better than Doc. Okay, like if we had Doc, they'd win a title.
I mean, probably not. But I'll say this: he has something that those other coaches that you mentioned, don't have. And that's Giannis Antetokoumpo. So
Yes.
that kind of helps to hide some of these flaws when you have a player that is as great as him.
Yeah, 100%. And Giannis is going to fill that up. I think with Budenholzer, he is not good at making changes game to game. But if he puts his mind to it and makes those changes at the beginning of a season and they tweak them for the entire year, and then you make it to the playoffs, then you can try it. You saw it the year they won the title. The reason that they were lower in the seeds that year was they were playing with the defense that whole year. I mean, you guys forget, you guys don't forget, but people listening might forget. Before the bubble, and even in the bubble, they didn't switch at all. They would play the advanced drop and get killed in the mid-range with floaters or layups or just guys that lived in the mid-range, which is pretty much only how you play basketball in the playoffs. Pick and roll, mid-range shot, kick it to the corner, or the big man's open for a thing. That's how the Brooklyn Nets win games in the playoffs. That's how the Golden State Warriors win games in the playoffs. That's how a lot of teams win games in the playoffs. So if you don't switch, you're done for. The next year, they play a lot more with switching, and their record is hurt for it. And then by the time the playoffs roll around, when they need to switch, they can throw it out there because they've been practicing it all season. So Budenholzer isn't that guy where he's like, now we're going to run, zone for 2 minutes, man for a couple minutes, advanced drop now, and we're just going to keep throwing different coverages at you. But if he introduces a new coverage during the season and they practice it, they're probably going to be pretty solid at it in the playoffs when they need to use it. He's a flawed coach, man. It's a flawed roster. There were mistakes, as much as I love Marjon, we talked about Giannis getting picked. They missing a lot of draft picks throughout this process. Jabari Parker, Rashad Vaughn, DJ Wilson, Thon Maker. Even however your thoughts on Dante are. I mean, Dante started at shooting guard for a couple of seasons for us, but the guy is not doing that for another team. You know what I mean? And there was guys every one of those years. In the Thon Maker draft, Sabonis goes 1 pick later. In the Rashad Vaughn draft, Bobby Portis goes a couple picks later. He could have been a Buck the entire time. They've made bad choices, and it's a flawed roster because of it. I think, considering the circumstances, they've got a bit. So I'll leave you with this. I know we're wrapping up. If you're John Horst, general manager of the Milwaukee Bucks, is going to do some shit like he does every year. Last year was the Ibaka trade. The year before that, it was Drew Holiday and PJ Tucker. He does it every year before the deadline. I don't think it's going to be Clarkson, but there's reports from actual reporters like Shams that said he called about Bojan before the Pistons landed him. And he was talking to the Pistons about Jeremy Grant before the Blazers sealed that deal. Now, if the Bucks land Jeremy Grant, that changes everything. I don't think we have the things, but George Hill plus Grayson Allen plus Jordan Moore gets you to about $15, $16 million that you can match. The Bucks have 7 tradable second-round picks, which is hilarious. No one cares. And they can trade their 2029 unprotected first-round pick. So only 1 first. You're not getting a star with that, but it's 2029, and I think people will listen. In my opinion, they're going to use that, and they're going to use it all at once. All 3 of those guys for $15 million and the first-round pick for one guy that's either a starter or a top 7 player on a playoff team. I'm not sure who it is, and I wouldn't expect it until the deadline. Horst is patient to a fault. That's what I'm going to leave you with because that's what I'm keeping an eye on. I'm also keeping an eye on the Mike Conley buyout. It's going to happen, guys.
That's a good fit for Conley, man. He needs some dogs behind him. That's
man.
That'd be a nice fit, man. But yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think you hit it on the head poetically almost. Talking about the Budenholzer, the Mike Budenholzer stuff, man. It also doesn't help that he always whenever they cut to him on the sideline, he always looks like a sad clown that's having trouble taking off his makeup, bro. Like a Joker thing. Like that's what Budenholzer looks like on the sideline. But yeah, man, that's gonna wrap us up. Raz, what was the over/under for the Bucks? I don't have it.
I believe it was 52.5 from DraftKings. Yeah,
I mean, Raz, you could kick us off with that. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah. I think you've convinced me on that trade deadline move happening. And if it is Conley getting bought out and signing there or something of that nature. that changes a lot of things for this team. I think they're gonna get the over here. Giannis is just too good. And then I think also with what you were saying about Coach Bud, it's more so he looks like he just witnessed like the worst bad beat on one of his parlays of all time. Like he had like a 12 legger going, and he was on to the last leg and pick 6 the other way, blew up the parlay with 30 seconds left when they should have took a knee. Like that's what it looks like. So it's like I think we follow him for that, but I think Giannis is playing himself into being the greatest power forward of all time. So he's gonna get them over. He's gonna get them. I mean, whoa, he's not there yet, of course. But that's the type of history and rare air he's trying to be in with his play. So he'll get them over 52.5 for this year.
I can go next. So I might throw you guys a little bit of a wrench here. I think Giannis, the way he is, he's a 50s floor. 50 wins is your floor if Giannis is healthy for an entire season. I think with the Chris injury, a couple of weeks at the beginning of the year, Ingles isn't back until December or January. The East, we didn't mention, obviously that's not what this pod is about, but the Cavs, the Sixers, all these guys are getting a lot better. I'm going under. I think they're going to win exactly 52 games.
Vegas is good.
Oh, yeah, they are good. No, that's a really good number for the Bucks this year. They got some of these, like I think the Magic number is a bit low, but some of these numbers are spot on. The Bucks one is on. Sean, what do you got? We split here 1-1.
Oh man, I'm taking over. I think we're getting. I think Giannis, Giannis MVP is that's it's an easy bet. I think this is the year. Obviously, there's going to be some type of Jokic fatigue. I think Giannis is probably the best bet, to win MVP. I just think this is a regular season team to where, some of the issues that we've spoken about for this roster, is probably going to creep its head up, in a bad, possibly, postseason matchup. I just see that, even, it's not a sexy roster by any mean.
Right.
But there's just, I think they have a formula, and I think that formula is going to lead to like 53, 54 wins. Especially we talking about like Ibaka possibly has some, Brook Lopez insurance. Who Brook Lopez, quiet as kept, probably might be the most important player on this team. Non-Giannis. I think he looked pretty good today. From I think they're playing the Nets right now. I just saw him. Maybe that was box score scouting. I just saw him make a 3, but especially what he brings for this team. A full season of Brook Lopez if he's able to stay healthy, and a lot of the other guys on this team. I'm not sure what their regular season peak has been so far in terms of wins. Off the top of my head,
they passed 60 once. The bubble year they passed 60. I don't know how much it was, but it was 60 something, like 62 or something.
Yeah, so I see them being up in that range again, and especially they won 60 in 2018, 2019, and then 56 again. Gotcha. I kind of see them. I see them in that 54 plus range for us again. But it's been a pleasure chopping it up with you, Gu. Always fun talking hoops. Definitely make sure you guys are checking out. Shout out to our boy Nick as well. Gu, go ahead. Plug everything that you got going on. Plug the pod, plug everything, any upcoming content that you guys got coming on soon. The pod is dope, so make sure you guys are tapped in with the phenomenal content they are putting out there.
Hey, appreciate you guys for having me on. I'm always happy to talk hoops, and especially Milwaukee hoops. But go give me a follow at _Gucifer on Twitter if you want. It's basketball and depression tweets. If you're into either both or one or the other, please feel free. At Hoop Truther Pod on Twitter, Hoop Truther Studios on YouTube. Go give at Nick Andre ATR on Twitter too. The man puts in a lot more work than I do, especially with the writing. But speaking of the writing, coming next week, probably, I'm going to start a weekly Substack for the season. I'm going to 35 Clippers home games this year, and I'm watching the Bucks as I often do. So it's going to be called Bucks Clips. It's going to be every week, just my thoughts on both teams, which coincidentally is my finals pick for the year. So we'll see if they can do it through all the season, and I'll be scouting both teams the entire time. So keep an eye out for those tweets, and please give the Draft Season podcast some love, all right?
I gotta tune into that. Buck clips.
Bucks clips. It's whatever,
Bucks
man.
clips.
Get over it. Yeah.
I like it. I just got I got to read every episode, every article to hate on Paul George because that is one of, if you're familiar with my brand, that's one of those things that we got to do on this here show.
Now the branding is fire, man. What did you say? You said basketball tweets and depression. Like it's
the two.
Underdog. Put that on a t-shirt, please.
Man, I had so much fun. Yeah.
Let's go wrap this up for today. Shout out to everybody checking us out on the YouTube page. We're definitely gonna be back with some more team previews to wrap up all 30 teams in the league right now. So Draft Season Podcast, man, it's been another team preview breakdown, and we're gonna be back with some more content for you guys shortly.